Every doctor said the same thing. The boy will never walk again. The billionaire father, desperate and broken, took his son everywhere, chasing every cure, every hope. Until one day, a little beggar girl stepped out from a dark alley, pointed at the boy in the wheelchair, and said, "I know how to make him stand." The father froze. Bystanders scoffed, some even laughed. But just minutes later, that same billionaire dropped to his knees on the sidewalk, choking back tears as he watched his son trembling, taking silent steps for the first time. It may sound impossible, but what happens next, you won't be able to look away. If you've ever lost faith, if you've ever thought miracles don't exist, then stay until the very end. Because the ending might just be what your heart has been searching for all along. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because here, we tell the kind of stories that make your heart believe again. Damon Whitaker had walked past that alley off street 100 times. But never like this. Never with the dull hum of wheelchair wheels replacing the patter of sneakers. Never with silence so heavy it made the city noise feel far away. His son Eli sat quietly in the wheelchair, wrapped in a blanket. He clung to the blanket as if it were the only thing left that could bring him comfort. The boy's light brown hair was tousled, his eyes fixed on the cracks in the sidewalk as if counting them gave him purpose. He was 10 years old, but he hadn't stood in over 18 months. Damon, once named the man who flipped Chicago by Forbes, had built a real estate empire from broken buildings and boarded-up blocks. He had turned blight into billion-dollar views. But all the money, all the influence couldn't restore movement to the legs his son had lost after a skiing accident in Vail. The doctors had been precise. T6 vertical fracture with spinal cord trauma. Permanent damage. The words had replayed in Damon's head like a broken record that mocked him with every tick of the second hand. Hope, once his fuel, had become his tormentor. That's when he heard the voice. "Sir," the girl said again, clearer this time. "I know how to make your son walk again." Damon turned, his grip tightening on the push handles of the chair. He expected some adult hustler, someone trying to sell a miracle oil or new age scam. But instead, a small girl stepped out from behind a dented recycling bin. She looked maybe 8, brown skin, big brown eyes that carried weight far beyond her years. Her hoodie was torn at the elbow, jeans smeared with city grime, and she wore shoes held together with duct tape. But her posture was straight, her voice steady. "Excuse me?" Damon asked, his voice a mix of irritation and disbelief. "I said I can help your son," the girl repeated. "My name's Amira. I live in the church shelter on Wells. I saw you two yesterday. He looked really sad." Eli glanced at her, not with fear or pity, but curiosity. It was the first time in days Damon had seen him look at anything with interest. "You've been watching us?" Damon asked. "Only a little," she said, shifting her weight. "I sit on the corner most days. A lot of people walk by, but you stopped. You picked up a glove he dropped. You didn't just rush away. I figured you might listen." Damon frowned, glancing down at Eli, who was still watching the girl. "My son's injury isn't sadness, young lady. It's neurological damage. His spine hasn't forgotten, just shut down." Amira interrupted softly. "That's what my grandmother used to say. Sometimes the body doesn't stop because it's broken. It stops because the heart is tired." Damon was about to dismiss her when Eli's small voice broke in. "Dad, maybe we could go. Just see." He hadn't asked for anything in weeks. Not TV, not dessert, not even a story before bed. But now he was asking to follow a barefoot girl from an alley. Damon closed his eyes, exhaled long and hard. "If anything feels wrong," he said to Eli, "we're leaving. Deal?" Eli nodded, the corners of his mouth twitching, not quite a smile, but something close. "Follow me," Amira said, already turning. They walked through the underbelly of the city, away from Michigan Avenue and into forgotten streets where the buildings leaned inward and the air smelled like rust and yesterday's rain. Damon hesitated at every turn, wheeling Eli over uneven sidewalks, avoiding broken glass and loose bricks. Still, something kept him following. Maybe it was Amira's calmness. Maybe it was Eli's quiet hope. Or maybe Damon was too exhausted to fight anything anymore. They reached a narrow courtyard behind a crumbling row of brownstones. An old wooden door, half hidden by ivy and faded canvas, creaked open without a knock. Inside was a room lit only by sunlight streaming through holes in the ceiling. It smelled faintly of lemon balm and old books. On a worn rug near a small cot sat a woman, her silver hair wrapped in a bun the size of a grapefruit. Her skin, as dark as Amira's, was mapped with age. "I was wondering when you'd bring him," she said to Amira, her voice as smooth as river stones. Damon stiffened. "How did you know?" She looked at him gently. "I don't know the future, sir, but I know pain, and I know when it walks through my door." Eli leaned forward, eyes wide. "Who are you?" The woman smiled, kneeling beside his chair. "Just someone who listens. May I touch your knees?" Eli looked to his father. Damon, heart thudding with doubt and a flicker of something else, fear, maybe, or hope, nodded slowly. The woman placed her hands on Eli's knees. Her fingers were rough, warm, steady. Her eyes closed, and a soft hum escaped her lips. A tune as old as wind, as tender as bedtime stories long forgotten. Eli jerked slightly. "I felt something," he whispered. "Like electricity, but soft." Damon leaned forward, gripping the armrest. "What do you mean felt?" The woman opened her eyes. "His body remembers more than he thinks." "That's not medical science," Damon said. "No," the woman agreed. "But science doesn't sit beside a boy when he thinks he's invisible." She turned to Eli. "Do you want to try to stand?" Eli swallowed, then nodded. She helped him carefully. His legs wobbled. His arms shook. Damon lurched forward, but the woman stopped him with a raised hand. Eli's left foot shifted, then the right. He stood. Damon fell to his knees, eyes burning. "Eli," he whispered. "Oh my God." Eli stood, shaky and wide-eyed, his arms hovering at his sides as if the very air might hold him. His legs, frail from disuse, trembled under his weight, but he was upright. Damon's breath caught in his throat. The world around him faded. The broken windows, the drafty ceiling, the ancient rug beneath their feet, all dissolved into the miracle unfolding just inches away. Eli looked at his father, a grin beginning to pull at the corners of his mouth, unsure and disbelieving. Damon surged forward but didn't catch him. He didn't want to. He knelt, arms extended but not touching, like a witness afraid his presence might break the spell. Eli took a step. It was small, more of a shuffle than a stride, but it was his own. He took another. Then his knees buckled, and he began to fall. This time Damon caught him, holding him close, pressing his face into the side of Eli's head as the boy shook with sobs. "I felt it, Dad," he whispered. "I felt my legs. I really did." Damon could only nod, his voice caught somewhere between a cry and a prayer. Amira stood silently nearby, her small hands tucked into the oversized sleeves of her sweatshirt. Her eyes calm, not smug, not triumphant, just still. The old woman stepped back, her hands folded, her expression one of peaceful expectation as though she'd seen this scene many times before. Damon turned to her, his face streaked with tears. "I need to know," he said quietly, "how you did that. I need to understand." The woman's gaze didn't shift. "There's not much to understand. The body obeys the heart more than we admit. When the spirit shuts down, the limbs follow. Your son stopped believing. But today, for the first time in a long time, he trusted what he couldn't see." "That's not how healing works," Damon said. But the words lacked conviction. "No," she replied gently. "Tell me then, how do you explain what just happened?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. He turned to Amira instead. "Who are you really?" Amira looked down, brushing a curl from her cheek. "Just a girl who listened to stories. My grandma raised me when nobody else would." She said, "People don't always need fixing. Sometimes they just need reminding they're not broken." She stepped forward, kneeling beside Eli. "I was born with a bent foot." Kids laughed. Grown-ups stared. "I couldn't run, couldn't play. Then one day, Grandma sat me down on this very rug. put her hand on my ankle and hummed. Just like today. She didn't ask me to believe. She didn't even say she could heal me. She just said, stand if you can. So I did. Eli looked at her, eyes wide. And it worked. Amira smiled. I never limped again. Damon stood slowly, turning back to the woman. Where is she now, your grandmother? Amira's smile faded. She looked away. Gone. Almost a year. Stroke. Her voice cracked slightly, the only sign of her grief. They put me in a foster home after that. I ran after 3 days. Nobody believed her stories. Said she was a fake, a con. Said I made it all up. So you live in the streets? Damon asked softly. Amira nodded. Church shelter most nights. Sometimes the back of a bakery near Southport. But I'm okay. I help people sometimes. Just like she did. You shouldn't have to live like that, Damon said. You're just a kid. A lot of us are just kids, Amira replied. But the streets don't care. The world forgets us unless we make it impossible to ignore. Damon looked down at Eli, who had shifted upright in his arms, his fingers twitching with cautious excitement. I want to help you, Damon said to Amira. I have means. People. I can get you a home. Education. Safety. Amira shook her head. Thank you. But this is where I'm needed. On corners where no one looks. Among people who think hope is for someone else. That's where Grandma always said healing begins. Damon felt torn, the weight of privilege pressing against the raw truth of Amira's words. She didn't want saving. She wanted purpose. And somehow, she already had it. Still, he pulled a business card from his coat pocket, crisp and embossed with his name and office number. If you ever change your mind, he said, handing it to her, or if you just need help, any kind, call that number. My assistant will answer. Day or night. Amira took it gently, studied it like it was a relic, then folded it and tucked it into a small inner pocket of her coat. Thank you, she said. Eli reached out a hand and took hers. Will I see you again? He asked. Amira smiled. If you ever stop believing again. I'll probably be nearby. Eli grinned and wrapped his arms around her. It was the first hug she'd received in over a year. She stood slowly, straightening the loose thread on her sleeve. You should go, the old woman said, her tone warm but firm. The boy has taken his first step. Now he must walk his road. Damon nodded, pushing the wheelchair slowly, though Eli insisted on walking a few paces, leaning on the arms for balance. He didn't say much on the way home, but his eyes were light with a fire Damon hadn't seen since before the accident. That night, as the skyline of Chicago glowed like a promise outside their condo window, Damon sat at his son's bedside. I can't explain it, he whispered, watching Eli drift into sleep. But I'll never forget it. He turned the business card over in his hand, wondering what would become of Amira, of the old woman, of that warm room beyond the alley. Somewhere in a different part of the city, Amira sat beside a girl no older than 6 who hadn't spoken since her mother left 3 months earlier. Amira didn't ask questions. She didn't offer solutions. She simply took the child's hand and hummed the same tune her grandmother had once sung. Because healing, she had learned, didn't always begin with answers. Sometimes it began with presence, with silence, with staying. A week passed, then 2. The late October chill deepened across Chicago. Leaves scattered like forgotten letters on the pavement. Damon Whitaker noticed how differently the wind sounded when it wasn't carrying dread. His mornings no longer started with the mechanical hiss of a wheelchair, but with the cautious thud of Eli's steps against hardwood floors. Each day, the boy walked farther. First across the living room, then down the hall, then from the elevator to the sidewalk and back. Not flawlessly, not without stumbles, but with growing certainty. His therapists, who had long since adopted a tone of polite hopelessness, now watched in disbelief as Eli described feeling in his calves, tingling in his thighs, a strange sense of returning. Damon had tried to explain what happened. Once, at the hospital in Hyde Park, in a room full of specialists, their response had been a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and thinly veiled dismissal. Psychosomatic response, one doctor said. Perhaps a reactivation of dormant motor function triggered by trauma-induced stimulation, another added. None could explain why the first signs of movement came not after a clinical procedure, but from a stranger's touch and a boy's belief. Damon stopped trying to justify it. Some things, he decided, just are. And what mattered wasn't how Eli had started walking again, but that he had. One cold afternoon, Damon returned early from a board meeting. He found Eli in the living room, practicing small, slow squats with a resistance band. The boy looked up, grinning, cheeks flushed from effort. "Guess what?" he asked. "Coach Delaney said I might be able to try out for junior basketball in the spring. He said I have motor memory on my side." Damon smiled, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about Amira, about the tiny figure with worn-out shoes and an old soul whose words had cracked open a door no doctor could force. He realized then that he couldn't let her disappear into the city's folds like smoke and wind. That evening, he called the number on the card he'd given her. A week passed. No answer. He tried shelters, soup kitchens, churches on the south side. He walked streets he hadn't walked in years, asked questions he'd once believed were beneath him. No one knew where she'd gone. Some remembered the girl with the too big hoodie and kind eyes. Others said she used to hum songs that made even the angriest kids pause. But no one had seen her in days. "She comes and goes," a volunteer at a youth center on Ashland told him. "She's like a shadow with a heart. Helps people, then vanishes." Damon left his number, his name, his promise to help. Still silence. Then one afternoon, as he drove past a row of shuttered storefronts, he saw a girl sitting on the curb, her back to the wall, arms wrapped around a younger boy. The boy's face was pale, his lip trembling, and his right arm cradled as if injured. Amira. Damon pulled over so suddenly the tires screeched. He stepped out slowly, careful not to startle them. "Amira," he said, voice low. She looked up, startled at first, then smiled softly. "You found me." I've been looking," Damon said. "I couldn't stop thinking about you." Amira helped the little boy adjust his grip on his arm, then stood. "This is Jack. He fell off a dumpster yesterday. Arm might be sprained. I've been keeping an eye on him." Damon looked around. No adults. No phones. No help. "You can't keep doing this on the street," he said. "Let me help you. Please." Amira shook her head. "This is where people hurt. It's where Grandma helped. It's where I'm supposed to be. But it's not safe," Damon pressed. "You're still a child. You think I don't want warm beds? Or food that's not from the back of a market?" She interrupted gently. "I do. But the people I help, they have no one. And they trust me because I am one of them. They don't see a charity worker. They see another kid who knows what it means to go to sleep hungry. Who knows what it feels like to be invisible." Damon sighed, defeated but deeply moved. "At least let me give you options. A place to go when it's too cold. Somewhere safe. I'm not asking you to change your mission, just to not forget yourself in it." Amira looked at Jack, then at Damon. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay. A number. Maybe a key to somewhere safe. That's fair." Damon handed her a folded envelope. "There's a debit card in there. Unlimited balance. It's yours. No questions asked. Also a key to an apartment on the north side. Fully stocked. Just in case." Amira didn't thank him, not out of rudeness, but because she knew what real help looked like. Not pity. Not pity disguised as charity, but quiet, sustained presence. "You know," she said after a moment, "Grandma used to say the city's heart is loudest in its quietest places. I think that's what you heard that day. Not me, just the heart." Damon smiled, his throat tight. "You remind me of someone I used to be, before I got lost in steel and numbers." Amira laughed softly. "Well, maybe you found your way back." They stood there, the unlikely pair, a millionaire and a beggar girl joined by something no ledger could tally. "Will I see you again?" Damon asked. Amira tilted her head. "Probably not how you expect. But if someone near you forgets how to believe, I'll probably be close." That night, Eli stood on the stage at his school's fall concert. No wheelchair. No braces. He wore a blue blazer and khakis. His steps were slow, but his chin was high. When the principal asked him how he found the strength, he looked at his father, then into the crowd. A little girl who believed I could, he said simply. And in an alley 5 miles away, Amira sat beside an old woman named Lenore, who hadn't spoken since her husband died the winter before. Amira didn't ask questions. She just hummed a tune older than memory, letting silence do what words often fail to. Because healing, as she'd learned, was less about fixing and more about presence. It was the stubborn act of sitting beside pain and saying, I see you. I'm not leaving. Damon never found her again. Not in person. But sometimes, when he passed an alley or paused at a shelter, he'd hear humming and feel a warmth he couldn't explain. Eli would stop, glance around, and smile. And they both knew, somewhere close, the city's quietest heart was still beating. Helping. Watching. Refusing to walk away.